Do you have something happening in the background? What is this noise?
Can you hear that?
Yes.
I was hoping you couldn't hear that.
Wait, was that your bird?
Yeah, that was my cockatoo.
Oh my God. I was going to say just bring him over. Bring him onto the podcast.
He gets really sassy around this time, though.
Oh my God. I love it. Welcome to the So You Want to Work in Healthcare podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Joseph Rad. He is a critical care PA. He's been in the business 7 years, and he's based in Atlanta, Georgia. So welcome, Joseph.
Hey, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. I'm excited to have you. And I should also mention that you have a very entertaining TikTok account, social media account, which is how we met. So we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I love your stuff.
Thanks. Yeah, that's been a fun time. I'm excited to talk about that too.
Yeah. We start by getting into why you got into healthcare to give our viewers and listeners an honest review of what you do. But first, I just want to say real quick that today's episode and every episode on this podcast are not medical advice, and our views do not reflect the views of our employers. All right. So why healthcare? Why medicine? Was there like one situation, a story that, made you inspired into going into healthcare, or did you kind of just find yourself in PA school?
Well, I'm not going to answer with a cliche. Like I love helping people, and I want to, be that person for other people when they're in need, which is ultimately true. However, that's kind of cliche, and it's not really at the root of why I went into medicine. I think first and foremost, kind of growing up, I have a sister that was in and out of the hospital a lot for various reasons, and thank God everything's okay now. But being in and out of the hospital with her for several years when I was much younger kind of gave me the first insight into kind of how the healthcare system works, how stressful that was for my family, and how important it is to have a good team. And then as I got older, I actually wanted to go into different things first. Medicine wasn't like my very first choice as a young freshman going into college. It was actually law. But then as I realized in law classes, I didn't want to do that, kind of brought me back to the medicine route. And I think it's a combination of, I love science. I found that's really where I thrived in school, and applying that to, ultimately being a person in someone's most vulnerable time, when they're sick and they need someone to help them, kind of marrying those two together, really what I found myself in medicine for.
I mean, yeah, we all obviously want to help people, but it is the cliche, the thing to say, or they tell us we just can't say it in our interviews, right? But like,
Yeah.
it's true. We do want to help people, but yeah, you're not the first person to say that you had a family member. Actually, I think two other people on this podcast so far also had sisters that were in and out of the hospital as kids. So it's a common story when we are exposed, I think, to healthcare at a young age, and you either have a good experience or a bad experience. And I think if either way, it could propel you into wanting to be in healthcare. So that makes perfect sense. When in your schooling, or where in your schooling were you when you decided to do the switch from like law to healthcare?
I think the first or second semester, so still freshman year,
Okay.
I started realizing there was far too much reading involved and politics involved and the branches of government involved that I quickly realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life learning all that stuff. So it was very early.
Okay, that's good. So you didn't have to backtrack much. You just could switch and get all your prereqs in.
That's right. Yeah.
Good. And then did you go straight from undergrad to PA school? How was that process?
No, I didn't. I took some time in between. I did a lot of traveling. I did a lot of volunteering, both domestically and internationally. And then I also got another master's degree in a different semi-adjacent field. So I did all of that, went back to school before I felt like I was ready and qualified to apply to PA school.
Oh, what was that? What was your master's in?
Homeland security with a focus in public health preparedness. So kind of like the public health realm, but more of an emergency, bioterrorism, disaster, kind of emergency preparedness side.
That's cool. What made you want to do that? Just get more experience, or?
I think it was the public health side of me that was interested, but also kind of knowing that PA school was very early on in college, knew it was always the end game, looking at how I can make myself more marketable, but also looking at what can I do if I marry the PA profession with something else, and kind of working maybe down the line for a government organization that could kind of put those two things together. Going through kind of in my generation, all of the, terrible things we've gone through in America, like 9/11 and COVID, I think being a part of that disaster relief effort is really intriguing.
I really haven't talked to anybody who's had this kind of path. So it's super interesting to me. And I've never even like thought about that. So I'm glad you are, because we definitely need people help when there are disasters. So I'm sure it heightened your application, and people are always asking me, and I'm sure you're getting these messages too on social media now, like what can I do to stand out with my resume, or like how do I get my patient care hours or whatever it is. But how long did it take you to do that first masters?
It took a little over a year. I was able to expedite it and get it done within 3 full semesters
And then that was before or after you traveled and volunteered?
after volunteering.
Okay. And then did you from there apply straight to PA school?
Yes.
And how was that? Did you have to apply to a lot of schools, or did you know where you wanted to go? Cuz like I only applied to 3 schools, but this was like back in the day.
Yeah. I applied to, I think, 7, and I didn't actually get in my first time.
Oh wow, okay.
And yeah, so I don't even think I got an interview the first time. Um,
Really?
eh, yeah, it was kind of a struggle in the beginning. And looking on paper, I felt like I was a pretty strong candidate. I had above average grades. I had different kind of curricular activities. I had a lot of healthcare experience, but for whatever reason, the cookie kind of crumbled in the way that it did. PA school is very difficult to get into, as you know. So it wasn't until I applied the second cycle and kind of looked at my application, found where the weak spots were, poked some holes in those. I went back and I took a couple of science classes over again that I got like a B minus in, that I went back and upped that back to, a more competitive grade. And I think did a couple different, and I took another job in like the healthcare field. So it was strengthening my application. And that is what a lot of people looked at and said, I see you applied last year and I see what you applied this year. And I compared the two and I see you did the work to improve yourself. So they took the time to tell me like that was the one of the biggest factors that impressed them the most. And then I got into my first choice, which was Penn State.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it worked out. Just took a little longer than I wanted.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I sorry for assuming, but like I with that other masters and your experience, I would just have assumed they would have all wanted you right away. But like it is so random how this works. I've talked to people who had what I thought was stronger than applications than I had. So and they had a harder time getting in, but it might just be the year, it might just be that, particular program, but um, side note, I spoke to Savannah from the PA platform, and she actually told me recently that you could, if you don't get in, and this is for people applying to PA school who are maybe having a hard time. If you don't get in, you can actually call the program and ask where your CV was lacking, or where your application was lacking, and they'll most of them will tell you. So I thought that was cool. I never even thought that would be an option, but it's awesome that you were like, okay, this is just a little roadblock. Like you went back and you fixed what you needed to fix, and you got in the next time. It's cool.
Yeah, I knew that there was really no other opportunity or any other option for me. So it just had to make it work.
Yeah, exactly. How was Penn State?
Penn State is great. So I'm an undergrad and my other master's in Penn State. So I'm a trifecta hat trick of Penn
Oh,
State. Yeah, I
okay.
owe them a lot of student loans. um, but Penn State's great. As an undergrad, it's a very different experience. Very social heavy. But Penn State PA program, I was a second class that they had. So it was a fairly new program. But our program director was very experienced. She came from another very successful program before she came and started Penn State's. But it was It was very difficult. It was probably one of the most challenging things academically that I've done. And, didn't think I was going to get through it all the time. There's a lot of ups and downs. They pride themselves on pushing people through and making sure they get it. So they don't like to not graduate people. But I think there's some PA schools that kind of almost say, well, we admit 30, only 20 graduate. And they almost say that with like a little bit of pride to be like, not everybody makes it. We only like push through the creme de la creme,
Yeah.
which always scared me because I was like, I don't want to start this and not go through. But our program director was very much like, no, if we think you can get in, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you graduate.
Yeah.
And
That's great.
that always felt really reassuring.
Yeah. I went to Pace and they were the same way, like they did everything they could to keep somebody in the program and make
Yeah.
sure that they were going to pass. And I think we had a pretty big class. I think it was like 50 or 55 and we only lost one. I mean, we didn't lose. It sounds like they passed away. But we only like one person decided to leave the program after the first semester. I've heard that like other programs kind of almost like boasting about how
Yeah.
it's hard and like it's so easy to get kicked out. I don't know. I don't think that's the way to go. But I'm glad you got into your number one pick. I almost went to Penn State undergrad and like really almost went, and I was there for my like orientation. And I don't know what happened, but I was like, I want to go to college Charleston. And I just like canceled. I had like my deposit was in and everything.
Oh,
And
wow.
I applied to college Charleston. I got in like 4 days later and I went down there. And then I ended up leaving that there. But I always wonder what would it have been like if I went to Penn State. But everybody has gone there. Like all my friends who went to Penn State absolutely loved it.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a cult. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
a cult.
Yeah.
There's a Penn Stater everywhere you go. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter
for
if
sure.
it's in the US or across the country, somebody's wearing something Penn State and you hear,
Yeah.
we are. So it's
Yep.
a good sense of community.
I will admit, I did not know they had a PA program. So thank you for teaching me that. How long ago was that?
I started in 2015. So the first year must have been 2014.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So it is fairly new. And it's a 2-year program?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
24 months.
And then after PA school, did you start working right away?
Yeah. I took my first job in Oregon in critical care.
Oh,
And so I moved completely across the country.
how come
Yeah.
Oregon? Like, tell me about that.
You know, I'm not entirely too sure why. I mean, I don't have children or, a partner at the time, so I didn't have any reason not to go explore the world. And I always had like a interest and I felt like a calling to the Pacific Northwest. It's a beautiful place. And I just happened to start looking for jobs out there and I found the one that I took and it seemed like a great gig. It was a great gig. And I just said, if not now, when and why not? So I moved.
Cool. Ah, I love that. That first job was in what field?
Critical care
Critical care. So you've been in critical care your whole career so far?
the entire time.
Is that what you wanted to do from the beginning? Like, did you know that, or is it something that you found out during your rotations? Like, what made you want to go into critical care?
I found out I liked critical care in my very last rotation. I was going into PA school with EMS, ER tech background. So I was like gung ho ED. I was definitely that guy that was like, oh, he's going to go into ED. And I did my extra rotation in emergency room. I was networking, already looking for jobs before the end of school in the emergency room. I thought there was no other place for me, but I did a CT surgery rotation as my final elective, which was my very last rotation. The surgery part I enjoyed, but it was very long, started to get kind of boring, especially as a student. But the ICU part of it really piqued my interest. And it wasn't until then that I was like, I never really thought of this before. Well, let's look into it. And the more I looked into it and networked in that field, I was like, I think I want to do it. And especially because I was definitely more naive in that area where I was kind of felt like I didn't know that. It kind of scared me, made me want to do it more. Put an ABG in front of me before I would have ran the other way. And now it's like, no big deal. So whenever that happens where I feel scared of something, I feel like I
Uh-huh.
have to do it. So
Yeah.
that's, I think, kind of what switched me last minute.
Oh God, ABGs, you just like gave me a real crazy flashback. I was so bad at them.
I
Uh
know.
they were so hard. I still don't think I could do one like an ABG, but I admit I'm in ortho, so
Yeah.
we're
So
like
why would you? Yeah.
like Dr. Calendine said, we're the dumb guys of healthcare. So, but no, it's really commendable what you do and how you just kind of went right into that. I definitely would have been scared, but it's so cool that you see it as like a challenge rather than run the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I still work in the ICU, but I am in charge of people's onboarding. So I give them a very nice kind of walk in the park entry into critical care. The job I had first, I was the first PA they ever hired. It
Oh,
was a very unique hospital in that it was the only one within like a 60-mile radius. So we just had sheer volume. And as a result, our community hospital was very high functioning. But it was just me and the physician, the ICU attending overnight. And we had a total of up to 48 ICU beds.
oh
So
my
it
God.
was wild. It was my first job, his first like real taste of it. So I was like, this is
Yeah.
normal. And they gave me 5 days of training, and it was on day shift. And they gave me
Five
the
days?
pager 5 days. They gave me the pager at night and said, try to find the answer before you call me. So I was quite literally like pushed right into the deep end on in a pool of fire. Fortunately, I was able to figure it out. And I know that people that have come after me have realized very quickly that it was not a sustainable job and had left. So I feel like people kind of almost have to sometimes come to that sink or swim where you either are going to do it or you're not. And it's either for you or it's not. And that may probably made me fall in love with critical care even more.
Wow, that's amazing. You're also not the first person to tell me they were like the first PA in their job, and it seems like number 1, you're like the guinea pig, right? They don't know what to do with you, so they either like don't give you enough autonomy or they expect too much, right? So, and then they just kind of like see what you can do and they take that and then they like increase it, if that makes sense. It's interesting how a lot of these hospitals, like high volume centers, will just hire a new grad as the only PA. Like, I don't know. I don't really understand that. I mean, I'm glad it ended up working out for you, but it just seems like they're just trying to save money or something. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe it's a save money thing. Maybe it's, we're not really sure. So let me like dip my toe in the water to see how this works, see if
Yeah.
it's something we want to invest in or not. None of the physicians that were in, I had a group of 9 or 10 of them. None of them had even worked with PAs before, even in throughout training and residency.
So how was that for you though? Like were you respected? Like how did it work out?
It was tough at times in the beginning. Some of the more cutthroat ICU positions were much less likely to either be invested or kind of let me do my thing. And others were very invested in my training and knew that if they got me to a place where I could kind of function without being having my hand held, then that meant that they could go to bed and sleep.
Smart.
So it was like a little bit of it depended on who I worked with, but they more than not, once they realized their quality of life improved drastically and patient care improved and the nurses were happier and everybody just really seemed happier that there was another body there helping, then they kind of were like, we now can't function without you.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a road to get there, but
Do they have
yeah.
more than one PA now working there, do you know?
They had at the height of us, they had 3 or 4,
Awesome.
and now I'm not sure what their census is like, but I know it's not more.
Okay. And then what brought you to Atlanta? Did you just want like another new experience?
Well, I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and so when I
Okay.
went to Oregon, it was pre-pandemic, and working through the pandemic was obviously hard for a lot of reasons, but one of the hardest parts was not being close to my family and not being even within like a few hours or even a half of day, like a day. Like it would take me a full day to get back to where I live. And then it would come times where I'd be like, oh, there's a little bit of a lull in the cases. Let me go home. And then we get spiked again. So then I'd have to, not go. So I didn't really get to see my family for a very long time. So I was like, my parents are getting older. I, am, never was a homesick kind of person. And I guess I'm really still not, but I wanted to be within a quick shot home.
Right.
And I wanted to go closer to home. I just didn't want to go all the way home because
Yeah.
Pennsylvania is cold and there's a lot of snow. And where
Yeah.
I'm from, there's not a lot that goes on. So I wanted to go closer, but not quite there. And then I found this job in Atlanta, and I said, why not?
How do you like Atlanta?
Atlanta's pretty cool. It's a huge city. It is definitely the biggest city I've ever lived in. There is so much to do. There's so much to eat. There's so much to drink. There's just like a ton that goes on all the time. And the airport is amazing. And
Oh,
I'm a
that's
huge traveler. Yeah.
yeah.
Like you, I love to travel. So the fact that I can drive 15 minutes to the airport and get anywhere almost within a direct flight is awesome.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. It is like a big hub. I think I've flown through there. I don't really remember, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's 15 minutes to the airport. Oh my god, I wish. I mean, it should be 15 minutes to the airport because I can basically see it from my window, but it's
Yeah.
always at least an hour. It's
Wow.
like
Yeah.
insane. But yes, love to travel. You said the job that you're in now is a little bit different. You're doing onboarding.
Yeah. So I'm the lead of my unit now. So that's another part, is that I was able to find kind of leadership opportunities in this new role where there were so few of us, so there wasn't really leadership opportunities where I was. So I was able to become the lead of the ICU where I am now. Part of that is onboarding new hires, new grads, making sure that they're able to practice, to their best ability, and managing my team.
It's great. It's awesome. Do you like it?
You know, I do. I like it a lot, but there's always, when it comes to management and leadership, there's a lot of things I didn't realize about it that are a lot harder than I thought.
So you're managing, you're leading people, you're sometime getting new grads, you said, and kind of making sure they're ready. Do they have more than a 5-day orientation process? I hope.
Yeah, they do. They
Okay.
definitely do. It's more like 5 months,
Okay, good.
and as happy I am for them to make sure that they get through that 5 months. We have a big team, so there's always someone around. So people usually do pretty well, but there's always a little part of me that's like, I didn't get this, so maybe I should just like kind of push you off orientation a little earlier and make sure you can do what you can while you don't have as much support. Because if I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, I'm just curious, and if you're comfortable talking about this, or if you're not comfortable talking about this, it's okay. But I think it's important. Well, how is the pay in Oregon versus Atlanta in this kind of situation?
Well, I think, you know, my job was unique in that I was the first one that got hired. There weren't many of us. They didn't really have a lot to compare it to. It was a private practice that was contracted by the hospital. So they kind of had a smaller leadership team that decided these things. And I didn't have a lot to compare it to. And I was a new grad. So
Yeah.
looking back now, I think I was grossly underpaid. And it was a night shift and the sheer amount of responsibility. But coming to Atlanta, I made, I'm now making a fair amount more than I was in Oregon. Cost of living probably is maybe about the same, maybe a little bit higher. It's good that I was able to make that transition, but I also consider I don't work nights anymore and I'm still making more. So comparing those two jobs, I definitely make more now. But as far as some of my other colleagues in Oregon that were doing similar things, they probably were making similar amounts. I just think my personal job I was being underpaid.
I'm really big on people understanding what a good salary is. And I think so many PAs, especially in the beginning when we're new and we just don't know what to expect and we just want to get a job, we take jobs that are grossly underpaid or overworked or whatever it is, or both. I
Yeah,
think that salary transparency is very, very important. I mean, I've been in situations with people here in New York City, which, in my opinion, when I started as a PA, was probably the most underpaid city based on compared
yeah,
to cost of living. Like My roommate from PA school got hired straight out of school in the ED in Michigan and was making a little bit more than I was making in my first job as a PA. So things have changed. It has gotten a lot better. But like, I'm real big on like knowing the statistics, like know what the average is, ask around, talk to your friends. Like, it is not illegal to talk salary. Your hospital may try to tell you that, but it is not illegal to talk salary. So that was my little tangent. I need to put that out there. What do you think is like the hardest part of working in the ICU? Because you're in the thick of it. You went through COVID in the ICU. Like, I cannot even imagine what you went through. But is it understaffing? Is it, you know, lack of support? I don't know. What is it?
I think it's probably a culmination of those things, and really anything you can think of can make the ICU difficult. The pandemic really, I think, broke us as a healthcare system, and it broke us as ICU providers in a lot of ways. Tons of nurses I know have stepped away from the bedside to different roles. Different physicians and APPs that I've met have done the same thing. So staffing is certainly an issue, and it's probably going to be an issue for a long time. The resources and support, of course, is going to vary from place to place, but that's always something that we struggle with because, there's always a million reasons why you can or cannot have something. The logistics are always going to be there that make it difficult. I think, however, when it comes to answering the question, what is the hardest part of working in the ICU? I think it's not necessarily like the acuity. It's not the death and dying rate. It's not the family conversations. It's actually the times where we have to prolong life without a good means to an end, and keeping people physically alive longer than what maybe they should be. And doing what's right by family members, or doing what's right by the patient's wishes, knowing that people like us have seen this 100 times over. It's not going to end well. And
Yeah.
using life support has like the variations of life support that exist now are incredible.
Right. Yeah.
From just not even ventilators, but ECMOs and different assist devices keep people alive for so long. And there's a line there. There's a line between keeping them along because the end of this looks like recovery, and then there's a different path where we're keeping them along and there is no hope for recovery. And the way we can do that is wild. And the ways that we can do that is honestly, sometimes, if you take a step back and look at it, almost a little morbid. And being able to keep people like with a heart rate and a blood pressure does not necessarily mean they're alive, and does not necessarily mean they have a good quality of life. But who defines what a good quality of life is? So it's kind of like this constant inner dialogue, constant inner struggle to, do what's right by the people that you are taking care of and their loved ones, and kind of struggling with how you feel about that.
Yeah, I can't imagine. It's not something I ever have to experience like in my field. So it's very foreign to me, and I commend you for doing it because I'm sure it takes like a whole other level of like emotional intelligence too, It's just I don't know. I can't imagine being in that position. So, thank you for what you do. That being said, could you give our viewers and listeners, maybe somebody who's going to PA school now, wants to become a PA, or even who wants to become a physician in the ICU, one piece of advice that you can give somebody trying to get to where you are now?
I think I would say make sure you take the time to do your research. Make sure you actually know what you're getting yourself into. And that research can be shadowing, it can be talking to multiple people, seeing things firsthand, really understanding what it is that happens on a day to day. What's the good, what's the bad, what's the ugly, um, and trying to really fully grasp what that looks like and how you would react to it as a person. Because, it there can be some really nice fluffy things that are around saying, oh yeah, I'm a healthcare provider in the ICU, that comes with a certain level of prestige where people will almost always be like, oh wow, that's great, that's really wonderful, thank you for doing that. But that is really just mere words as far as what can actually affect you and what can actually drive you to keep going or halt you in your path. So really understanding what the ins and outs are before going into whether that's PA school, physician school, nursing school, ICU, whatever it is, like really understand. Don't just say it looks nice on paper and go for it. Like
Yeah.
really do your research.
Yeah, totally agree. Couldn't agree more. Actually, I think you really don't know what it is until you're in it. And like you could say that for probably any experience or profession, but I thought I wanted to go into like general surgery or actually cardiac surgery. And I was so set on it. And then I wasn't able to get a rotation in it. So I never actually did get to experience it, but my rotation in orthopedics was so much fun. I immediately was like, "Oh, this is what I actually want. Like this is what I
Yeah.
want to do." And you really don't know till you get there. And I think a lot of us do change. Like it was your last rotation and then now it's your career and you didn't I think a lot of people end up on that path where you kind of like think you have an idea, but you really don't know until you experience
Right.
it firsthand.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
like that old TV
shadowing.
show.
What?
Remember that old MTV show? It was like you think you know, but you have no idea.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is the story of Jennifer
This is
Lopez.
yeah,
Yeah.
what wait, what show was that? It was,
I can't remember.
what the heck? No, I know the show. It was Behind the Music. Behind the Music?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think
Right?
so. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So good. Now, what do you love most about your job and what do you hate about it? So let's start with what you love about being an ICU physician assistant.
Yeah, I think what I love about doing what I do is the kind of critical, like care, the critical thinking side, which really makes my mind just think in ways that I feel like are growing my intellectual ability and being able to think through really difficult cases. And then as far as I love that, I love the procedural aspect just as much. And I'm sure you can understand that being in surgery, using your hands, doing the procedures we do in the ICU, which are central lines, arterial lines, intubations, chest tubes, LPs, all of those things really excite me. I really like to be able to accomplish that task and do it well. So I think kind of the merriment of those two things really keep me going. And the things I don't really love so much, apart from what we were talking about earlier with like the kind of death and dying part of the ICU and what that looks like for each patient. The other part that is kind of a bit of a struggle for me is, and this kind of lends itself to the PA profession in general, is that I would say 90% of my colleagues respect us as APPs just like anybody else in the healthcare team. But there are always going to be people in the healthcare field, in my opinion and experience, that are going to be a little bit backhanded, that are going to be a little bit not as respectful to us because we're PAs.
Yeah.
I think as generational turnover happens, that's a lot less. But I think there's always going to be a little bit of the I want to talk to your attending instead of you kind of mentality, which is fine. That's okay. That they're there, they're allowed to do that. I don't need to have these conversations all the time. But just kind of that feeling that people sometimes give us in the ICU, which is like you're, not who I want to talk to. When most of the time, I am the one you want to talk to.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
that's just kind of the things I don't really love about it.
Yeah, I think we all deal with that. But it is cool that you get to use your brain in critical ways and you get to be hands-on because I'm a very hands-on person so in my job. So that would I definitely fulfill me, I think. If I could get over the scariness of being in the ICU. But I love what you're saying. I love what you do. Tell me about your social media agenda. Did you just get on like TikTok to provide some comical relief like I did? Or are you kind of like out there to spread the word about being a PA? Like what is your goal here?
I started my TikTok. Actually, I was kind of anti TikTok in the beginning, and I
Yeah.
was. more of like Instagram. I it's just kind of how it was. And TikTok, I was like, that's not for me. That's not for my generation. But in the middle of the pandemic, when you really only have like your cell phone, I was like, you know what? Let me just kind of see what this is all about. And
Yeah.
it's so easy to get down the hole in TikTok and kind of get consumed by it. And I was one of those people that got consumed by it. And then I was like, let
Yeah.
me try making some videos. And it was fun. It was creative. It was a way for me to kind of have a fun, creative outlet that I wasn't getting in the middle of the pandemic from like other personal interactions.
Yeah.
And then as
Wait,
I
I need to stop
continued,
you. Oh, do you have something happening in the background? What is this
can
noise?
you hear that?
Yes.
I was hoping you couldn't hear that. My hold on one second. Okay. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay. It was actually good timing because my camera just overheated and shut off, so I had to change to my webcam, but it's fine. Wait, was that your bird?
Yeah, that was my cockatoo.
Oh my god. I was gonna say just bring him over. Bring him onto the podcast.
I should have. I just put him to bed.
Aw.
This is about his time. 7 o'clock is usually his bedtime, so he starts flipping out if I don't put him in his cage.
Oh my god. I love that. Um, I was saying, like, what is your social media agenda, basically?
Oh, right. So I was actually never really interested in TikTok in the beginning. I was
Right.
more Instagram. And then when in the middle of the pandemic is when I started it. And we really didn't have anything other than my phone. So I decided to kind of download it and see what could happen. Download it. At the time, it was kind of like the really only thing of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have Instagram Reels or whatever. But at the time, it was new, unusual. It was easy to grab your attention and hold it for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I said, why not just like do some of these weird videos that everyone else is doing? And I started it, and then I started kind of like using my creative side,
Mm-hmm.
and I started saying, well, how good can I get at this? Or like, how I wonder if people will find this funny.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out very easily that you might think you're funny, but the internet will tell you if you're funny.
Exactly.
And what you think is funny is not necessarily funny to other people.
I
Um,
know.
and I love to laugh. I love to have a good time. And that is like I really believe, as cliche as it sounds, laughter is the best medicine. It always fixes my day.
100%. Yeah.
So if I can find, and I appreciate it when videos come across my feed that just like make me stop and I'm rolling.
Yeah.
Like that makes my day. So if
Yeah.
I felt like if I could bring that joy to somebody else and bring that moment of laughter to somebody else who might be having a bad day,
Mm-hmm.
it was really worth it to me. And it
Right.
was a great way for me to be creative, kind of have that outlet, connect with people in a time where you couldn't even connect with your neighbor, and make someone laugh, make someone's day. So that was
Yeah.
kind of what started it. And now I'm just continuing.
It's awesome. Same. I need that. I think we need humor as healthcare workers. Like, we need healthcare humor because we can get so lost in like the seriousness of our jobs. And I think it can easily spiral downward. Like, I mean, there's times where I've felt just like so sad after a tough day at work. And I'm
Wow.
sure you do. Obviously, you deal with even more heavy stuff. But I think it's so important to have this like humor in our lives, even if it's just like a 10-second video. So I love
Right.
your videos. Keep doing it. I think you're funny.
Well, thank you.
It's so weird though. And it's so hard because like, I'll do a video that I think is like, I'm cracking up making this video and it's just like doesn't get much attention. And then I'll do like kind of a cringy video where I'm like, I don't know if I should post this, and I'll post it and people are like loving it. And I'm like, God, people are so corny. Like, why do they like this cringy stuff?
Yeah.
But it's still so fun. And yeah, it's really cool that I'm meeting like people like you on TikTok and Instagram, because a lot of my guests have been people I've met on TikTok. I have friends like in the city here now that I hang out with in person because of TikTok. Like, it's really amazing. It's gotten a little weird, but the height of the pandemic really was the best time for TikTok, but
It was.
it's still fun. So where can people find you? What is your handle?
My handle is the Raddest PA, on both Instagram and TikTok.
It's the coolest name. How did you even get it?
Well, I wanted to do the Rad PA, but that was
Uh-huh.
taken, and by somebody that works in radiology. That's a PA.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, if you're the Rad PA, I'm going to be the raddest PA.
Yeah.
My last name's Rad. So
right.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense. I like it better. The raddest PA. It's the best. Is there anything that you would do differently in your course to becoming a physician assistant or, getting to where you are today?
If anything would have done differently, I would have just started earlier. As much fun and how much I was able to learn and grow as a person after college, like taking those years to travel and volunteer and even get my other masters. I look at some of the PAs that went right after graduation of high school right into it, or did the 5-year program. And I'm like, well, it would be nice that at 35 right now, soon to be 36, I could have even more experience and I could be even farther in my field, and I could probably be just a little bit farther along. And kind of starting late makes me feel like I'm 35. I only have 7 years of experience. Like, do people take me seriously? Am I too old for this? Like, those things kind of sometimes cross my mind. And although I truly feel like those experiences I got after college before PA school did help me grow as a person, and those are invaluable, it would be nice to be, 15 years into my career versus 7.
Well, I will say that while I understand what you're saying, I am 12 years into my career and I feel pretty burned out. So I feel like
yeah, I guess it's true.
And I didn't get to travel and I didn't get to take time off. Well, not that I didn't get to, I chose not to, but I will just try to help you see that I think the decision you made was probably for a good reason. And I'm a big believer in like everything happens for a reason. So, I, for one, am just jealous of the time of you for taking the time off, but I see what you're saying. Like, it is the age thing, especially we're the same age. We just found out it's weird. It's definitely like, sometimes I feel, I don't know if I'll put this in the podcast, but between you and me, sometimes I feel like should be a PA forever? Like, am I supposed to be an old PA? Like, because do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it feels like a career where I'm like, I feel like a little kid still. I have to ask people for permission for things. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to be 40 in a few years. I don't know. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I do. No, I completely and totally know what you're trying to say.
I'm like, am I going to be a PA for life? I don't know.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to think about, being like an old an old PA. I'll have to change my handle to the oldest PA. And it's because I've seen the people that are ready to retire in our role.
Yeah.
But it's a weird dynamic to think about because I'm starting to get to the age where new attendings are coming out and that are younger than me.
Yes.
And, I have to, like you said, sometimes ask for permission or get trumped by, their decisions, which I understand that sometimes just how it works.
Yeah.
But it's like, I'm older than you.
I know. I know. It just started happening like last year, where like the fellows are younger than me. And I'm like, what? I don't know what to do with this. But yeah, is there anything else you want to talk about or anything you want to say?
I think you had some really great questions. I think we talked about some really fun and also heavy things.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zeus wanted to be part of the podcast too. I should have brought him up. Zeus? That would have been fun. He gets really sassy around this time though. So usually he's pretty quiet, but when he's not, he's not.
All right. So thank you so much. This has been really, really great. Thanks for taking the time out of your day, out of your Friday to do this podcast. This will air on YouTube and all listening platforms. So if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please don't forget to give a 5-star review. It takes 2 seconds. And then afterwards, it'll be on YouTube. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. This podcast is the So You Want to Work in Healthcare podcast. So that's where you can find us across all platforms. Thanks for listening and can't wait to see you guys in a couple weeks.